America has fewer and fewer affordable homes available to the public, and it's a massive, massive issue. And this is because of political ambitions and incentives that have gone on for a very long time, over a decade. And what is doing is pricing out the next generation from home ownership. Up to 40% of people's income is now going to shelter costs. And when this happens, people pull back from having kids, from getting married, from going out and start building their lives. And it's taking longer and longer for the next generation to start buying properties and building equity. And this is a massive problem. The average age of the first time home buyer now has moved up from 28 years old all the way up to 40 years old. The median age of a home buyer today is 59 years old. Same with repeat buyers. This is a massive crisis that's going to hold back the United States if the government and local governments and state governments do not get control of what is actually happening. There are definitely solutions to the problem. I'm going to share with you some of the solutions that could solve the affordability crisis. But first off, how did we get here and what's happening right now on the ground? Yesterday, I got an insane email from a Realtors Association begging for realtors to show up and lobby city council members to focus on affordable housing units versus this mid-tier luxury. So there's no shortage of real estate in the United States. We have the appropriate number in the more than ever of physical structures available for people to live in. And so this is not a problem of is there a shortage? It's a mismatch. What builders are incentivized to build are properties of the $500,000 to $700,000 price point. They get, that's what the cities want too. They want this higher level inventory. The builders are incentivized by the cities to do this higher level of inventory, luxury inventory, especially in their downtown areas around the city, because they generate tax revenue off of it. So let's dig into what the data is telling us. I think you'll find this really interesting for a presentation and learn a lot here about what is actually going on in the housing. So let's see. This is what's crazy. I got this email the other day. This shows that the Flagler County Association of Realtors is reaching out to realtors because this directly impacts their clients' business and future homeownership in Palm Coast. We're at a critical point when it comes to workforce in attainable housing. It is workforce housing that we're talking about here. The decisions being made over the next few weeks will shape what inventory is available and what price point for years to come. There's an opportunity to show support for more for sale housing options that are affordable. But it will only move forward if the city council clearly hears from the professionals working with buyers every day. We've received feedback and calls from members regarding the challenges your buyers are facing in today's market. It's a complete affordability crisis because we had all these wealthy people move up from New York, New Jersey, and California in 2020 to 2022. They drove up the prices. The builders started building product in that luxury price point from, $500 to $700 to $1 million as basically a starter home for these people, because they're not like massive homes. They're 2,000, 2,500 square feet at these price points. And that's totally unattainable for the local working population that, most of them, their income, the median household income in Jacksonville is around $78,000. But what it takes to buy a median price home is you need about $116,000. So it's a huge problem. We're not building in the price points that we need to be building in. The reason is because there's no incentive for the builders to build there, and the cities don't have an incentive to build there either. But it is totally solvable. So stay around. I'm going to share with you some of the things that I've researched so far. I'm not saying I'm an advocate of any of these or not yet. I'm starting my research on this. How do we actually solve this from a city by city basis, and which cities out there have actually already achieved some of these issues or solve some of these issues to a certain extent. Public comment is the beginning of the meeting. Your opportunity to speak the lack of inventory at entry-level price points. That's right. An entry-level price point used to be around $190,000, $200,000. Now, it's really hard to find a single-family house that's less than $400,000 unless it's way outside the city. It doesn't make sense. Share real experiences from your buyers. Explain how the current pricing is impacting their ability to purchase. The city councils need to wake up. The mayors need to wake up. They need to focus on this issue. Florida, the number one issue is affordability, and it's causing net domestic migration patterns to change away from Florida, and people are actually going to the Midwest. Support solutions that expand attainable homeownership. Even a brief 1 to 2 comment that can make an impact. So it is so bad that the realtor associations are calling upon their realtors to show up at city council meetings. I think this is a huge indicator of how bad things really are on the ground here. Now, obviously, when people, are spending up to 40% of their income in just for their shelter costs to live, and they have no surplus capital after working every single year, after taxes, after everything, living expenses, there's nothing left over. So then they say, how am I supposed to have a kid? And we're starting to see fertility rates every single year just have this stepward down decline because people are putting off these massive life events and getting older when they're having kids and maybe deciding to just have one kid instead of multiple. So what are and I want you to answer this question and feel free to jump in the chat. Love to hear from you guys. Any questions you have, I'll answer at the end of this meeting. Again, I'm just figuring it out like the rest of you. I don't have magic pill here, but I'd love to hear any ideas that you have because I'm talking with policymakers and I want to make sure that we are focusing on the right issues. But there's too much short-term thinking in politics. And this is what the real issue is. What is the consequence if we don't build affordable housing long term? Well, if we don't fix this issue, we're going to have a demographic massive issue because people literally just cannot afford to live. They're not going to have kids and you're not going to be seeing those grandkids. So this is the huge problem that we have, with the bottom 90%. Obviously, this issue does not impact the top 10%. That's, their wealth continues to compound and accelerate and the wealth gap continues to expand. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about workforce people making $15 to $25 an hour. We're seeing their fertility rates fall. We also notice that the household size on this red line continues to trend a little bit downward. We're actually seeing a tick up, right? So people were spreading out. This is because of, 2020 time period. They're leaving the house. They're going across the country. People are kind of spreading out. Now we're seeing, because of this affordability crisis, people actually starting to move back in with each other into more urban areas so they can get their costs down and still be close to work, which is pretty interesting. So here's the idea that works. Okay, I'm going to explain what works and what doesn't work. Okay, so this is what we're saying. If we just let the market be free, I don't understand why the government feels like they have to be involved in every aspect of our life. It's getting out of control where we're even talking about a surveillance state at this point. But this is the real pattern of things that work. Zoning reform, which means get rid of this zoning. Just stop with all of the restrictions. Make it easy to rezone product for developers. We need to increase the supply of affordable housing. That's how you do it. Multifamily expansion. So we need to do infill lot development, put a fourplex in a single lot. Stop with the not in my backyard people. There's actually countries that outlaw the not in my backyard. They say the city councils can't stop developers from building the product that they want to build. And those areas do not have affordability crisis at all. Conversions, right? Converting something from an office into, multifamily, for example. We need to increase the supply and we need to do it at a steady state. We also need to reduce the cost to build, right? There's all these parking can add like an extra $9,000-$10,000 by having these ridiculous parking requirements. We need to get the permits faster. I like the idea of, making the city accountable. If they don't get the permit out in like 60 days, then they don't get revenue on the permit. And then tax changes, right? There's ways that you can incentivize builders to build affordable housing through something like a REV grant, which basically says build this affordable housing. You don't have to pay, taxes for the next 20 to 30 years. We do that for our multifamily luxury developments downtown. Why are we not doing that for our developments, for the affordable developments? Find tax incentive, gives them, remove the impact fees, remove the utility hookup fees, remove, all of these, the permitting fees for this development that we need to see for the workforce housing. Add non-market supply, right? You could even do public housing. This is something that, is probably not on the top of my list for something to do, is have the government get involved, because I want less government involved. But other countries are doing public housing and they build regardless of the market for workforce housing. And it basically prevents this situation where you have a bunch of these huge $1 million houses and then there's no workforce housing except for outside of the city, and they have to travel in, and it's very expensive still, because we're just not letting the developers develop at the right price points. Meanwhile, you have folks who are developing these luxury products and they're getting fees from the government, a development fee to develop luxury products that really it's just unaffordable. But the government wants it because they get tax revenue from these really expensive developments, right? Because they don't tax just the land, they tax the building value as well. So the question is, the reason we're here is all because of incentives. There's no one who's lobbying the government. There's no like group of people who's lobbying a council member or a mayor and donating to their campaign who represents the working class people, right? It's only the developers who want to get their development fees. They want to develop in a specific issue area where they can get 38, $50 million on a development fee to just finish a project. So this is a total mismatch, and it's completely solvable. The problem is that the financial incentives there for these smaller developments that are more affordable, number one, there's the not in my backyard people. They don't want it. They don't want this stuff. And it's a huge problem. Um, where are we going to put these workforce housing developments, and how do we maximize them and get the land? I think it comes with just incentivizing the developers to do it and getting out of their way. Now here's what we know doesn't work, and this is unfortunately what the city of Jacksonville is doing right now. They came up with like a $2 million loan that can come out here, and we also have down payment assistance programs. What this does is actually just subsidizes demand of the buyers who are on the marginal rates anyway. And there's a lot of problems with these programs, down payment assistance programs. This is where cities mostly waste their time. Rent control alone, just doing that alone is not a good issue. One-off affordable projects where you just build one single affordable development, that doesn't work. Political fights over small funding gaps, we're seeing that right now. It's like they're fighting over $1 million on an affordable housing project, but then they're granting somebody else down the street on a luxury project $40 million. Okay, it doesn't even make sense, and it's not big enough to move the market. It's a nice idea, but it's not big enough to move the market. If we want to win in Florida, we need two things. We need to bring affordable housing, and then we need to attract young families to Florida, and then incentivize also to have kids here and settle here long term, so that way we can have a middle class. Because right now we have a very thin middle class. They're not earning enough money to live within the shelter costs. Our median income here in Florida versus the rest of the United States is about 10% less than everybody else, or $10,000 less than everybody else, and our expenses are much higher. If we want to solve the boom bust cycles of Florida real estate, we need to really get involved with deregulating and not having so many fees, and let the developers and incentivize the developers to get this workforce housing done. There's some good stuff that's like 10% of the development. If you're getting city money or federal money or state money, 10% of the development has to be affordable housing, which is fantastic. Increase it. Increase the amount, find a way to get more. I mean, this is going to take longer because it's only 10%, but every little bit helps to get these prices down. So that way we can start attracting the next wave of people to our state, which is right now one of the scariest factors. Is people are not migrating here any longer. They're going out to the Midwest because we've just simply have this affordability crisis so bad, again, that the Realtor Association is going in and actually trying to lobby for affordable housing from the city council, who most of the time just don't get it. A lot of these people just don't understand it. It's not that they're stupid. I think they're just financially incentivized not to solve this problem, because what do they get? What do you get from solving this affordability crisis if you're on the city council or you're the mayor? Obviously, there's no financial incentive to do it. So they have to do it out of the goodness of their heart. They're going to get pushback from not in my backyard people, and it could be an issue for their campaign. But if we don't focus on this again, this short term thinking, people will not move here and they will not have kids here. And we're going to have a massive housing crisis over the next 20 years if we don't solve this problem. Now, look at this. This is from the National Association of Home Builders. It's a great chart. U.S. households buy highest price home they can afford 2026. You can see the majority of people are under $400,000, but what they're doing is they're building up here in this segment. This is where the developers are building. That's where they have the fattest profit margins. That's where they're getting the financial incentives from the city, is this price point here. What we need is right here. We need to build stuff that's under $300,000. That's nice quality stuff for starter homes. We need the starter home affordability. So what you're doing when you build in this price point is you're just focusing on the top 10 to 20% of home buyers, that most of them have to relocate here from other high cost, high tax areas, and see it as a cheaper location. Obviously like $1 million house versus, here in Florida is fantastic versus $1 million house in New York. but they're building for these people who are relocating here versus building for their local population. And I personally think that that's not a good move, but that's just the reality that we're at. So if you're seeing this yourself, drop a comment. I'd love to hear what you're thinking. All this data that I'm sharing with you, because it is getting worse every single year, and the affordability crisis is absolutely real for the working class here in Florida. It's getting so bad that consumer sentiment is hitting record lows, right? We just had this massive wave of inflation for, a couple of years due to zero interest rate policy, and the consumer sentiment is bad. We're so sensitive to prices now. We go to the grocery store and you can see like the little incremental differences. People are watching every single dollar, and obviously with oil prices going up, that's going to funnel through in the next quarter or two into food prices, other prices. But this is the consumer sentiment index. It's the worst level it's been since 1952. So there's a huge disconnect between Main Street and Wall Street. Okay. Wall Street is crushing it. Stocks are at all-time highs. A lot of investments are at all-time highs, but the working class, the low income class, they are having a massive struggle right now in the marketplace. But the people who are running the country are in the top 10%. So we're seeing this massive disconnect, all these tax incentives that are primarily benefiting the super wealthy. Meanwhile, there's not really as much care or anything passing on the middle class, the working class. So we're basically supporting all of these very, very wealthy people out there through these policies that we're putting out there, and it's making things worse. And this is where, if we don't kind of change direction sometime soon and let the market be free and stop, moving the regulations and in the tax plans and everything to try to give benefits to one group of people over another, I think we're really going to end up with some sort of debt crisis here in the future. And the consumers, which are about 70% of GDP, will start to really slow down. And we're going to have a really massive slowdown in the marketplace. So this is all coming if it's not focused on, and I hope it is. And that's part of the reason why I make these videos, right? I'm not going to just complain about what's happening in the housing market. I want to provide solutions and ideas, and I would love to collaborate with you. If you have a great idea, I'll try to get it in front of some of the policymakers that can actually make a difference and start thinking about this stuff deeply, because it matters. All of this really matters. Right now, what we're seeing with the Iran war, we're seeing, basically mortgage rates jump right back up to 6.45. There's a report that came out yesterday from Lance Lambert saying 6.5%. This is a huge problem for affordability, because now we're at near record high prices for the housing market. Meanwhile, rates are still moving up. We were at 6% just, a couple months ago. Once the war started, we're up to 6.5%. If rates go up another 1%, we're going to see home sales slow even more than they are right now. Here in Jacksonville, pending home sales are down 34%. Year over year for the month of February, the month of March. And that's a huge problem. And inventory continues to stack. And it's not the inventory that you might think. It's actually because people are like, well, inventory is actually going down. Well, no, what's happening is the sellers are getting frustrated on their houses. They're not selling. They pull them off the market and they turn them into a rental. And so then we have these accidental landlords and a ton of rentals. And now rent prices are falling, which will cause home prices to continue to fall. So we're continuing to see this kind of cascading effect in the marketplace. So again, I'd love to hear from you guys in the chat. I see you guys in there. If you want to drop a comment, give me a like. I appreciate it for the channel. I come on here once per week to talk about the most recent housing data, what we're seeing here in the marketplace. So, give me a like, and I'll come at the end of this to answer any questions from the group. So I appreciate you being here. The 10-year treasury is starting to move up, and obviously this is going to continue as the Iran war continues with the oil prices, the concerns from the Fed. Obviously Powell said he's going to hang around a little bit longer, as a Fed governor. Through his speech yesterday, because he's basically getting politically prosecuted from the Trump administration for, the development that he was doing with the Fed, the $2 billion, and because he wasn't willing to lower interest rates. So I know a lot of people want lower rates, but at the end of the day, the market, we want a free market. Everything can be solved by getting the government out of the marketplace. This housing affordability crisis, the debt issues, all this stuff, there's constant manipulation to keep this going as long as possible. We have to feel pain at some point. And obviously, if the government just keeps kicking the can down the road, we're going to deal with unintended consequences that are going to be much more challenging to solve in the future. So we're seeing, this 10-year treasury start to move up. there's going to be a credit crisis at some point in time because of how much borrowing we have. We're going to, surpass $40 trillion for the federal debt. It's a massive issue. It should be taken seriously, and no one is taking it seriously because it's political suicide to stop the spending and stop giving out the money to the constituents. So here's what we're seeing with oil prices. We saw this massive spike yesterday after Trump said that they're going to do a prolonged blockade, and that's going to cause issues. Then, all of this does roll into housing prices, right? We're in a bubble right now, an artificial bubble that was inflated here in the Sun Belt areas because of the zero interest rate policy, because we had demand shock from 2020 to 2022 that pulled forward about 10 years of demand in 3 years. And that caused, these starter homes to get gobbled up. Also, the investors gobbled them up. We had hedge funds go in. Mostly is actually mom and pops that would buy 3 or 4 of these starter homes for their retirement portfolio. And then we stopped building in that price range, and we decided, hey, let's go ahead and start building the mid-level luxury. Those are where we can get the highest price point. That's where we can get the most margins. And there's no incentive to build the workforce housing. So it's a massive issue. But prices now, because they just got so far out of control, we're just got into another bubble. And now the locals are completely priced out. Domestic migration to Florida is down 93%. We're actually seeing people move out of Florida from a net domestic migration standpoint. That we actually just saw that report come out in Tampa and in Miami, where people are moving out. But there's still international immigration that's making up for that. But international immigration is down 70% as well. So look, we're seeing transactions are slowing, inventory is building, and prices are getting cut. So this is what we need to see. We need to see a reset, or what I would like to call a mean reversion of the housing market to a normal market. But one of the ways that we can solve this so we don't go through these boom bust cycles again is getting a thicker middle class here, less speculation. Let the developers develop the product that they think that the consumers need, that they can sell, that they incentivize them to build in price points that we want to see in the marketplace for the workforce housing. So that way people can actually afford to live here and grow their families here long term. That's how we're going to win. So look, this is what I say. This is on X. You can follow me on X at John Brooks. I put out all the charts that I find very interesting with my commentary on them every single day. Florida didn't have a housing shortage. We basically had a migration bubble. People from New York, New Jersey, and California pulled 10 years of demand in 3 years. Now they've already moved. The next buyer is completely priced out. The locals are priced out. And that is why we're seeing the pending home sales collapse. And it'll continue to collapse until prices fall by enough to actually get the next wave of people to come in. Well, I did the math on that. Prices would need to move from the peak of October 2022 here in Florida down between 31 to 42% before it even makes sense for someone to come in and actually purchase a house. Because in a lot of cases, it's cheaper to rent here now because we have all these accidental landlords. The multifamily was completely overbuilt because it's luxury multifamily. It wasn't in the price. It wasn't in the workforce housing. When you look at the multifamily, it's like $3,000 a month to rent them. That means you're putting $36,000 for rent, and the median household income is $78,000. So what? They're going to spend 50% of their income, up to almost 50% of their income on this stuff, just for rent. I don't think so. It's then they obviously have utilities and all these other expenses too. It just doesn't make sense. They're not going to be able to ever get ahead. So that's why pending sales are falling, but we have all this multifamily. We're seeing multifamily rents drop. You obviously don't have a shortage when you have rents dropping, vacancy rising, and prices dropping. So this narrative of a 10 million houses short is just complete baloney. And they're basically, the administration is saying, from 2000 to 2008 at that rate compared to what we were building over the last decade, that's why we're 10 million short. That's not really how it works. What we need is the supply at the right price point. So we have a pre-supply of mid-level luxury and a shortage of affordable housing because of the incentives or lack thereof incentives to actually build the workforce housing. So the reality is right now what we're seeing is that it's already worse than 2008 from a various number of metrics. When you look from affordability standpoints, when you look at the wealth of Florida and the divide between the wealthy and the poor, and we're seeing the domestic migration falling, and this is while stocks are at all-time highs, which is unbelievable. So we're seeing kind of crisis level signals without there actually being an actual crisis. This is just simply an affordability crisis. But sellers are still pricing their home like it's 2021. We always joke that it takes about 8 months for sellers to get real of what's going on after they've had their house on the market. But they're pricing it as if we have 3% interest rates and now we're at 6.5% rate. So the math stopped mathing. And every 1% increase in interest rates decreases, in my opinion, about prices about 10%. So we should see likely over time, and this stuff doesn't play out overnight or anything like that, or even in a year, over a decade, it seems, even with the demographic issues, and the government's going to come in and try to save everything as much as possible. It's not difficult to see that we could see prices come down 30% plus, over the next decade. But because the math is just so far disconnected from reality, and mean reversion always happens. So this is what we're seeing. We obviously see this. Oh, we have a shortage. This is a picture of my local market. You can't even see the name of it. All those green dots represent for sale. If you overlaid all the rentals on top of that, it would be crazy. And what's not included here is a lot of these new construction communities with multiple phases, they don't list all their properties. They usually only list one or two of their properties, so it doesn't get the full picture. But the White House is getting it wrong. They're saying what they're trying to do is exactly what doesn't work, which is subsidize demand. We need to subsidize supply, okay? Because subsidizing demand will just push prices higher. What we need to do is just massively build affordable housing, incentivize builders to do affordable housing, and basically get rid of these impact fees, not get rid of, but redesign them in a way that makes sense, because it's just gotten out of control. Impact fees, permitting fees, the permitting process, changing the zoning laws, make it easier for developers to build these products and sell the product. So this is subsidizing demand. We want to subsidize supply. And I think that's what the administration, unfortunately, is getting wrong. Here's where you're seeing the apartment rents are declining because we overbuilt in this mid-level luxury that people can't afford. So the rents are coming down. This is a great thing. And of course, that's turning, when rents come down on multifamily, it impacts the single family. The single family goes down, impacts the multifamily. And so we're starting to see this kind of decline happen, and then it happens in the price too. So when the price comes down, it's also a problem. So look, I'd love to hear from you. If you're in the middle class, how are you feeling about the market? Obviously, if you're in the top 10%, you're crushing it if you own equities. What are you seeing on the ground in your market? Because every market's so individual. There's a lot of unique factors that are happening up in the Northeast. The reason why they have elevated housing prices up there in massive affordability problems is because the not in my backyard people are so adamant they don't want this affordable workforce housing near where they live, and then they push them out, and they make it extremely difficult to build. And it's a huge challenge. It's better definitely in Florida and in Texas and in some areas of the Sun Belt, but it's not good enough. It's not good enough. We need to let these developers develop, small multifamily infill lots. We need to have these developers be incentivized to build at these prices, just like the luxury segment is incentivized by the cities. We need to do the same for affordable housing. Yes, you're not going to get a fat check for your political donation from these people who are in the workforce housing, but you're doing the right thing for the people of the city. And so I encourage the city to think about this, and I hope they listen to this. If you can pass it on to somebody, have them reach out. I have a lot of housing researchers out there. I don't know everything. I'm just throwing ideas out there, and I'd love to hear what you're thinking too, because when we all put our heads together, we can solve this issue. I do believe this affordable housing issue is solvable. It'll make Florida stronger when we do solve it, and it'll be less dynamic for the boom bust periods of Florida. That is a huge problem for local governments in the city long term, and also it'll help with the massive demographic crisis that we have with the silver tsunami coming through the pipeline, where 22% of the folks in Florida are likely to be passed away in the next 15, 20 years just because of their age. And all those houses will be coming to the market, but they're at the wrong price point. They're the wrong size. They're in the wrong location. And we're having this misallocation problem with the inventory that we do have, but it's not a lack of inventory. We have the physical structures for people to live in. It's just a mismatch of pricing and location. So with that, I would love to open it up for the group to answer, ask questions. And, if you have any ideas on what I shared as well, that'd be great. So I'm going to go through the chat now. So thanks for listening to my rant about this. I'm passionate about it because it's something that obviously needs to be addressed. And if you're just joining now, rewind to the beginning where it shows that the realtor associations are begging realtors to go to city councils to talk to them about creating attainable workforce housing for the next generation. That's how bad it's getting, that the realtors are begging the city to help developments in past developments in affordable price points. So I think FHA should introduce the first time home buyer for home building, 3.5% interest on a home up to 250K, use once forever. The only thing I just don't like, I don't like the government subsidizing demand. Again, it would be a lot better because it's going to drive prices higher for the marginal buyer. And FHA folks generally have lower credit scores, so it can also be risky when they're doing that at the beginning of this type of cycle. But 250 price point, if you had that in Jacksonville, that would sell all day because usually the price point where people want to be at in Jacksonville for the locations is around 350 to 450. So that'd be interesting. It's an interesting idea. How about everybody, a first time home buyer must carry 25% equity? So there's an argument for, the 30-year mortgage is part of the reason, part of the issues that we're seeing because people aren't developing enough equity in enough period of time, and they only stay in their house for 10 years. So in 10 years, the majority of the money goes to interest payments on the loan. Versus, so yeah, and people only live in their house for up to 10 years, usually on average. So I think it's a good point. There's a lot of people who say just bring back 20-year mortgages and encourage 10 to 15% down. Then obviously you're going to price out the bottom 90% because they can't come up with that. I mean, most of them can't even come up with 2% down at this point in the market cycle. We're scraping the bottom of the barrel. If you're not super wealthy and you're just a working class individual, you're scraping the bottom of the barrel to put two nickels together to buy a house. That's generally how it is here in Florida. It's very rare that you see, even dual income working families, if they have two kids, there's just not enough money. Get rid of permitting fees. What's next? No property tax, some government accountabilities. So Matt K, I get it. What I would do is I'd remove permitting fees and impact fees for affordable projects, not for this mid-level luxury stuff. Okay, so I think we do need to focus on deregulating, but I think you can be intentional about what you consider affordable housing or workforce housing and give the benefit there. Okay, so you're not getting the permitting fees to the super wealthy or the upper middle class income folks. You're really truly trying to solve the affordable crisis, not the people who already have a ton of money. In Reno, they just realized a plan to build 15,000 homes that monthly payments will be 80% of the area's median income. They're literally planning to build a home people can't afford. Yeah, we're seeing that here too. They're building unbelievable billion-dollar houses in the middle of nowhere where there's no jobs with the net domestic migration falling. So it doesn't make any sense. It does make sense because what I think is happening is these cities want to have more tax revenue. In 20, 30 years, they want to see the developments happen. They want to see a certain type of clientele that are relocating to their city in these beautiful communities because they want to get tax revenue. They also probably get political donations from developers. So that way, and then in return, they approve the developer projects and maybe give them some sort of rev grant or some other grant to develop or a completion fee, something like that. So, it's political. I think it's political. And, I think money does have to do with this. There's financial incentives and, there's no one who's fighting. Again, there's no lobbying arm that's going to represent these workforce housing folks. There's no one who's getting together and doing that. So the city council will have to say, hey, this is important. We need to solve this. Otherwise, people aren't going to have kids here. They're not going to relocate here. And we're just, there's not going to be any workforce for us. So it's going to, in 20 years. So it's a huge issue that I think needs to be addressed right now. Same crap in auto market, 7-year loans. Yep, exactly. It's the same thing. They keep extending the loan term to be able to get you in debt. And that's exactly what you're seeing on the housing side too, right? You're not selling the car, you're not selling the house, you're selling debt. You're selling debt to somebody who has to hold it. And then by the time it's paid off, like the car is completely depreciated. But in housing, it's different because the loans are amortized and they know you live in the house for 10 years and you're paying, again, majority interest on those first 10 years. So your bank makes way more than 6.5% because you're paying the interest on the loan up front. And that's huge. I like your collabs with Melody. Thanks, Matt K. Appreciate you. The only real estate news that I trust. Look, Candlestick TV, I'm just putting out my thoughts, okay? I've been in real estate for more than a decade. I care about the middle class in this country, the working class in this country. Those are my people. That's where I came from. I was, negative $80,000 in debt in 2014 and became a multi-net worth millionaire through real estate, through selling real estate, through building multiple businesses. I work with the middle class people every single day. I see the issues that they're going through, and I'm so close to the data. I'm watching it, literally every single day, new information that's coming out, and that's formed my opinion over the last couple of years. I am also someone who doesn't like the government being involved in everything that you do. I don't think they should be anywhere near this stuff, and they've just gone crazy with the amount of regulation, the amount of fees that makes it very challenging to develop, and then they're giving the incentives in the wrong price points. And I think that's one of the major issues that we're seeing. I think this is solvable. So thank you for the feedback. I really appreciate it. So let's see. Anecdote of my community: a guy went to jail and had people cooking drugs in his house, and he got let out. I heard he lost a house, but wants to keep the bank never foreclosed. Thanks, Matt K. All right. Thanks. Currently driving. St. John's is building up like crazy. Yeah, St. John's County is building like crazy. There is a lot of legitimate demand there, though. We are seeing people relocate from the Northeast. And they have the reason why St. John's is great because people love their school system in their public school system. And that's really hard to find in Florida. So people are really big fan of St. John's. The developments there, used to be in affordable price points. They're building still phase 3, phase 4, phase 5. It's one of the places where if you're a dual income working family, it's a great place to relocate. There's tons of kids, tons of good schools, all that kind of stuff. So I do really hear a lot of great things about St. John's County, but we're also seeing a lot of FHA delinquency there. So that's the other aspect too, because the developers, the builders are offering these massive incentives to buy houses, will buy down your rate, et cetera. And they're really extending it. And they're finding 3.5% FHA buyers that bought in 2022. And now prices are down 100 grand and they're underwater. They need to sell, it costs another 5% to sell. They don't have the money. So there's a lot of people in St. John's that are also just scraping by. That's actually where we're starting to see a ton of FHA delinquency. If you follow John Comiskey, he has a great Substack that shares where the delinquencies are actually happening by county. And St. John's is one of those counties that might surprise you that they're actually starting to see some delinquency there. And so we might be seeing some foreclosures. We're definitely already seeing tons of short sales because there's phase 3, phase 4, phase 5 behind you. They're providing massive incentives. They're reducing the price. They're trying to get this inventory moved because they have overbuilt in certain pockets, not everywhere, but certain pockets of the area. Just jumped on. Please explain what you want deregulated. Hey, constructive criticism. Go back and watch the beginning. I have like a whole chart or two on that. Requiring owners to hold equity fixes everything, but no one likes it because it would completely stop speculation investment and leave it only for owner occupant buyers. Well, yeah. So one of the issues, the Philly Fed came out with a report in 2023 that said up to 33% of loans are fraudulent in the way that they're not owner occupants. People would buy, for example, using an FHA loan, 3.5% down, and then immediately turn it into a rental property. Well, there's no accountability around this. Okay. They turn it into a rental, either a short-term rental, long-term rental, whatever, and they wouldn't actually occupy the home. And there's no accountability around this. And so we had this wild speculation that happened because of the zero interest rate policy. So again, it was the government, the Federal Reserve, that stepped in and moved rates to artificial levels that caused the speculation to happen. So I don't blame people for speculating. I blame the person that made the decision to create that, to put it to zero, that then caused this unintended consequence for speculators to go crazy on high levels leveraged debt assets that they thought would continue to go up in price forever. Well, now we know that's not true and prices are coming back down. So it's a huge problem. Everyone talks like you need to recruit kids to a cult called life. It's kind of disgusting. Solution to Fed, Musk's to recruit unwilling kids to the cult. I'm not sure what that means. Me, John the Don, alternate to forcing density in housing, force decentralization in workforce housing. So yeah, I mean, they need to increase an alternate to forcing density in housing. I see into offices. Yeah, that's the conversion. I was comparing prices in Orlando Metro to a small city in Mississippi. I saw numerous homes for 375 to 500 that honestly would sell in Orlando for, yes, exactly. The cost and we have the land. Okay. So that's the other thing too. We have the land that can be developed. There's tons of land in Florida that can be developed. So we have the spots that we could actually do this. So again, yeah, I agree with you. I think it's a great way to end this call. Whenever the government interferes, they make it worse, right? Anything that the government touches generally goes up in price. There's no accountability. There's usually some sort of backdoor dealing between them that I think is really unfortunate. I feel that a lot of the elected officials do not represent our interests when they actually get in. And I think this is a huge problem. Do I blame? I don't necessarily blame Powell. Okay, so because you got to understand, there's multiple voting members on the FOMC. There's 12. So, and there's people on both sides politically of those 12, and a lot of the times they vote in lockstep. But yes, they kept the zero interest rate policy way too low for way too long. Yes, I absolutely agree with that. Powell and the FOMC in total were part of the reason why they're late to react to basically everything, and they left it to be just a speculative bubble, and the government incentivized it 100%. And then they put in these regulations in place to drive revenue to the city that doesn't actually help development at price points that we need it. So look, thank you guys for watching. If you need help finding a top real estate agent in your area, let me know. I can connect you. If you have trouble with a short sale in Florida, I can help you with that. You just want to run your situation by me, let me know. I drop my email in the chat, and so you could reach out to me. And if there's any other questions, I'll hang around for another minute or so. I've also got a Substack, um, called Think Big Question, everything that comes out with real estate data every single week. So if you want to stay connected that way, I'm also creating a mastermind. I'm in the middle of writing a book for real estate agents. It's called Get In to Get Out. And it talks about how to, most agents don't make any money. You'd be surprised. I know a lot of you are like, you hate real estate agents. They don't make any money. About probably less than 5% of them make enough money to actually retire. I could show you the math on why that is. The real estate brokerages take a big chunk. They're not profitable either. You saw the Remax got purchased by Real. It's a horrible acquisition, completely different cultures. The real estate brokerages, they make 1.68% EBITDA margins, which is horrible. So they don't make profit either. None of these people are making profit. Everybody thinks that these real estate agents are getting away with tons of money. They just don't. Between the licensing fees, the taxes, what they have to pay their brokerage, the fees to just simply operate their business, the fees, they buy the photos on your house, they buy Zillow Showcase, they buy all this stuff. They end up spending, 2/3 of the money promoting the house. They make 1%. At the end of the day. So it's not as much as you might think. And then they have to live off of that. And the majority of agents sell, 2 to 3 homes per year. Uh, you know, so there's a very, very small, just like all sales professionals, a very small group of people who truly make money selling real estate. Well, I talk about who those people are, how they operate, what they do to succeed. And then you can actually see the math that you need to get out of real estate, make so much money you can get out of real estate. But it's way more work than you might anticipate. And it might be very enlightening for the public to be able to look at that too. So appreciate you. If you need any help, reach out. If you have any ideas on policy, you want to connect, things like that, I'm open to it. I'm starting to talk to more and more people. Thank you for following on X. People are starting to pay attention on X, getting retweeted, getting pushed out there to just share this alternate view. And look, I reserve the right to change my mind upon new information coming in. I'm learning this too. It's just something that I'm passionate about, that I appreciate you guys following along for the journey. So thanks so much. I'll talk to you later.